Hi everyone, this is Mike from Sweet Briar Farm, and in this video I'm going to talk about fermenting pig feed, how we make it, and the pros and cons of fermenting pig food. So first thing I'll do is I'll show you how we make the feed, and then kind of go over the pros and cons of why we are actually fermenting feed. Fermented pig food is kind of like something you hear about people doing, but I wanted to know, what the overall benefit was for the animal for fermenting the pig feed. So the hog feed that we purchase is from our local mill. It's a mix of corn, soy, and essential minerals for the pigs, and it's a 16% protein, which we feed basically all our pigs from the time we wean them till the time we butcher them or maintain them as we do our breeders. As the breeding pigs get bigger, we will reduce their feed to about 4 to 5 pounds per day. Feeder pigs will feed twice a day, basically one scoop per pig twice a day. A lot of people will free choice their pigs, and that's fine too. When we grow out our pigs, we just do twice a day feeding, so it's worked well for us. How you do yours, it's up to you. There's many ways to pet a cat, so it's just what we do. One of the benefits is cost savings, so you can actually pretty much double the amount of feed that you're feeding your pigs by fermenting. So I got a 5-gallon bucket here. I'll show you how many scoops it normally takes to fill up a 5-gallon bucket with pig feed, which what we would normally distribute throughout our pigs. So I'll show you that here. So I've got Tractor Supply feed scoop, and I'll show you how many scoops it normally takes to fill up a 5-gallon bucket. So that's nine scoops of a Tractor Supply scoop, 3-quart scoop, which I think is about, I don't know, we kind of estimate about 3 pounds per scoop or so. So 9 times 3, 27 pounds, call it 30 pounds in a 5-gallon bucket. So what I do is I fill a 5-gallon pail about half full with water. And when I initially do this, I'll add a little bit of my other starter to it. We inoculated the feed buckets with raw milk. And one of the benefits of fermenting the feed is that you get lactic acid bacteria that will ferment the feed. And then it's that lactic acid that will reduce the pH of the food. And that's where you get the benefit from the fermented feed. So I have these other pails that I started. This one was this morning. This one was last night. And you should get like almost a sour smell from it, kind of like if you were making sour cream or yogurt. And that means that you have the right bacteria in there to produce the lactic acid. So now what I'll do is I'll put a scoop of my starter into my new pail. Actually, not even a full scoop, just a little bit. But this is kind of like an inoculum. Kind of like if you were making sourdough and you had like a sourdough mother. You just kind of keep it going. So I know I have the right bacteria in there. So now I'll add dry feed to this. Do 3 scoops to start. Gonna mix this up into a slurry. See, it's still pretty wet. So 5 scoops total. just mix this up. So here we have kind of a pretty loose consistency, and what will happen is the grain will absorb that water, and it'll turn it into more of this mash-like consistency. So I can take one of these 5-gallon buckets and feed it across our pigs. So that 5-gallon bucket would normally we'd be feeding 1 scoop per pig, basically a 5-gallon bucket across all the pigs. I can reduce that to 5 scoops of feed and the rest of that water. One of the other reasons why we're doing it is because, well, we're just maintaining these sows as our breeders. They don't need as much fat and protein to maintain them, even though that we do have three sows that are pregnant and growing piglets. They're still in really good condition. We haven't noticed any loss in condition, but they just love it. The other reason why we're doing it is because it kind of fills them up more. So if you have pigs always act like they're starving. So by feeding them this more dense consistency feed, it seems to fill them up and keep them satiated longer between feeding. So normally when I walk out here, the pigs hear me or see me, they act like they're starving. So those are some of the benefits. But the lactic acid bacteria that build up in this feed reduce the pH of the feed, and then therefore the pigs are consuming a more acid food, which helps their digestion and actually reduces the number of or prevents pathogens from actually forming and growing inside their guts. So one of the research papers I read is that pathogens like salmonella are greatly reduced by feeding fermented feed. One of the downsides is if you don't ferment the feed correctly, you can get more yeast that will grow in the feed, and those will produce off flavors, and so some from alcohols and different acids, and may not be as palatable to the pig as the pig might like. One of the other drawbacks from fermented feeds might be a loss of certain essential amino acids that are added to the feed if the fermentation is not done correctly. So we like to ferment the food no longer than 24 hours. So I started the one this morning. I'll feed that one tomorrow morning, and the other 2 pails I'll feed. One's kind of a half full, so I'll feed that this evening, and that way the unwanted bacteria and yeast don't overcolonize that feed. How do you like the food? No complaints? The other thing that you have to take in consideration is the temperature. If you live in a really hot environment, we get pretty warm. It's been in the upper 70s, 80s. We will have weeks here in the 90s. So keeping it in the shade when you do this fermentation is a good idea if you get really hot. So the paper that I read suggested really about a 9-hour fermentation is really all that's needed for the benefits of fermentation, of feeding the fermented food. So there's a little bit of artistry to it, but I think once you start doing it and get your system together, it's pretty easy, and the pigs really enjoy it. Seems to have less waste too with that feeding that dry feed versus the wet feed. The dry feed is really dusty, and it seems like you lose some of the feed when they're chowing it down, and and throwing their feed bowls around and spreading it around on the ground, it's kind of a loss of food. Well, some of the other benefits of feeding the fermented feed is for when you wean the piglets, they will transition from the mother's milk to the feed better. So they really enjoy that wet feed as compared to just dry feed. I know whenever we wean piglets, they will usually have diarrhea for a few days as they transition to the higher protein feed. So that diarrhea is actually reduced when you do the fermented feed. So like I said, I like to keep this out of the direct sunlight as best I can. Keep the temperature good. But this one was done last night, and it's a nice, sour smelling, so I know that there's that correct bacteria in there. I also like to keep a loose lid on the buckets. But overall, it seems like the pros outweigh the cons for doing this type of feeding for the pigs. Again, you're kind of reducing the amount of feed you're giving the pigs, and you're giving them good bacteria for their gut health. In some upcoming videos, we'll talk about how we manage our livestock on such small acreage, micro-grazing, dual-purposing our crops, and things like that. So, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe. We'll see you next time.